I remember some of the verbs I picked up in Korean at the time. But again, if you're not really speaking with someone or you don't have a native with you, it's hard to really get breakthroughs.
Apps. What would you use? Do you use? Is there anything that you might recommend that you still feel is useful? And then you've continually now hinted at the fact that you're probably going to say that 1 hour is not enough time. How much would you say then, this person who's saying, all right, I hear what you're saying, the 1 hour is not enough. How much do I need to? All right, so apps, and how much time do I actually need to spend in learning a language?
Okay, so in terms of apps, this is where, like, I'm 31 years old now. So when I was studying, I dabbled in Rosetta Stone. And that was useful to a certain extent. I remember some of the verbs I picked up in Korean at the time. But again, if you're not really speaking with someone or you don't have a native with you, it is just it's hard to really get breakthroughs. So I would say with apps, still to this day, they can be the cherry on the cake. There's massive value in apps. I think tutoring apps, right? Rather than sitting down and like flicking through like, okay, this is the word for pen, this is the word for table. If you can actually speak through an app with a native speaker and get that live correction, or
a human, you're asking. Sorry,
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Something like, I don't want to name names. This is so far, I don't know if this is sponsored or not, but there are apps where you can speak to a native speaker and they can have incredible value, especially on the go. I mean, this is what I've done for years. I've helped people with their English. And they've been on the subway, they've been in their cars parked, they've been in the back of a car while someone else is driving. How practical that is amazing. Still not 100% substitute for face-to-face, but if you can have an app where literally you've got someone you can speak to and they can really get you like native-like expressions, that would be my recommendation for apps themselves if you're going to spend half an hour on an app. And then the second part of the question was about how much time. It's hard to quantify it because, for example, let's say your habits, anything that you do normally in your day now. Do you listen to a podcast? Try listening to a podcast in like French. You're trying to learn French, okay. But your level is not high enough yet to fully understand it. Okay, watch it with the subtitles. Active learning, passive learning, we've spoken about before, right? You can still, your habit of listening to a podcast, now that's 1 hour of a French podcast. You like video games, your video game, I remember I used to play FIFA in French and Spanish. Goal, 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 saca la banda. I know what that means because I was sweating FIFA in Spanish. And, I know all this because I sweat FIFA. But I knew that I had to, I was studying French and Spanish. So that half an hour of FIFA, which someone could look at and say, oh, video games, waste of time. At least I was practicing my listening, in French and Spanish at the time for that. So then video games time, that's now in your language. You might like, I don't know, anime. I recently, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, last week I was scrolling through Netflix.
Sure.
And I saw there was a new Pokemon movie, Pokemon something something Jungle.
Okay.
I just watched it in French with French subtitles because why not? It kind of was like nostalgic to watch Pokemon after all this time. At least while watching it in French, my brain is doing something. So then you watch an hour of Netflix, you watch an hour podcast, that's 2 hours. FIFA, 3 hours. This might not seem so valuable, but the compound effect of a year of all of those, as long as those are like supplementary, if you're then studying that with all that immersion, half an hour speaking to a tutor, the gains are going to be tremendous. But like I think you mentioned in another conversation, it's like brushing your teeth, it's like planting a tree. You don't see the gains overnight. The people who are addicted to the short-term gains, unfortunately, you're not really going to, apart from the dopamine rushes of, 안녕하세요, wow, this foreigner said hello in my language. That's fun. Pakistani guy, black guy, you can surprise people. That's very fun, but you can't get deeper. That's very surface level. Like, unless you go and properly study, like we mentioned, it's hard. I mean, hours and hours every day, but the hours don't feel like hours when it's, when you're watching a YouTube video, I don't feel like, I'm studying so much now. I like food reviewers. Mm-hmm. I would watch some French food reviewers. I learn these words. Then I'm still enjoying my chill time, but just put it in the language. Especially once you can understand, even if you don't understand, put your subtitles on in English or whatever language you speak. You will build up and grow over time with that, but habits and routine have to stick. It's like, I'm still working on my fitness. It doesn't matter how, if you train super hard for a month, I'm going to be a professional footballer. For 1 month, I train like a pro. Then after that, you just stop. Yeah, it's better to, getting that consistency, I think, is really, really important.
See, now you've essentially confirmed, and we didn't plan this just so everyone is clear, but you've essentially confirmed something that I've been saying and stating is one of the biggest drivers for our method in artificial immersion, which is you need to transform. You need to change your life. And what you're telling me when you're deciding to watch Pokemon in French, listen to a podcast in French, play video games in French, talk in French, is that you've decided to opt out of the English part of your life. You've decided to transform. And I think that it's really important for people to hear that someone that's successful in doing that it's not just me saying, oh, this is how you got to do it. Like, you came upon that yourself, and that's what I needed to do. All that time you just talked about, those 4 hours essentially, you could have done in English. And you didn't because you wanted to change, right? And so transformation, I find, is a huge aspect. But I want to go back now to the vocab list we started off on. Not only is it important, obviously, to learn words, a lot of people can get really obsessed. Like you said, in Korean culture, maybe it's high up there. But can you touch on reading at all? And how important, I know the research behind this, but in a more practical sense, how did that work for you? Graded readers? How did you find what to read? And when it's too high for your level, how did reading play a role?
I'll admit that reading in general was something that I could process information very fast, but sitting down and reading a book, the attention, I would get distracted. So even in English, audiobooks transformed I can say when I tell people now, oh, I've read that book. You recommended Deep Work, right? I read that after you recommended it.
Sure.
I didn't really read it, I listened to it.
Sure.
But I still absorb the information. Arguably, I just know that I retain information a lot through my ears.
Okay.
So in general, when it comes to French, Spanish, other languages, I rarely actually write things down. But I obsess over the audio in my brain. I repeat things obsessively that people say. We can probably speak about that a bit more later. But then when it comes to reading, I haven't actually read that many books in other languages, but my reading comes from subtitles. For example, if I'm watching a documentary, I will put let's say French documentary, French subtitles. I am reading obsessively those words. I'm the type of person that even in English, I like having the subtitles on things because I want to scrutinize the language. I want to see why did they use that word. And in French, I'll do the same. Why did they use that word? I don't know that word that they used. So I am actively watching this documentary in French and I'm going through, I don't know what that word is. And then I'll look it up. So it might not be literature in that sense, and maybe that's a challenge I need to set to myself because so many people I've interviewed have said the importance of that, and I really, I take that criticism, seriously. That I'm sure there are a lot of benefits of it. These days, I haven't read in other languages as much. I think that needs to be my new challenge. But even though haven't read books, if you've ever played a Pokemon game, you're just reading the whole time. If you watch something with the subtitles, especially, again, it depends on what your goal is. I remember watching Pokemon in French when I was studying it at uni, and I would pick up a lot of words, and I can still remember clearly there was someone in the French saying, approchez, approchez. I just didn't know what it meant. And I asked my Mauritian friend, what is he saying? Approchez, approach, come here. I learned that, and I still remember vividly from a Pokemon episode. So having the subtitles and reading it on the screen can really reinforce I think it's so valuable, one of the best things out there, but I don't actually read that much of this.
Since we're talking about subtitles, there's a debate online all over the place. For some people with language learning, subtitles or no subtitles. My question isn't subtitles or no subtitles, because I think I agree, especially at the beginning, very important for you to see the word. It helps, especially if you can read the script. My question for you is, when do you know to start taking them away so that you're not reading, but you're training your ear? Because some people have an issue where they get into a situation, especially a language like French, the pronunciation's a little different, the grammar, etc. How would you know when you need more oral practice instead of this subtitle based when you get kind of taken off the training wheels? How do you know when to do that? Why should you do that, etc.?
I think you just got to test yourself, because we actually had a class at uni called Advanced Oral Competency, And this is where they pushed us to our limits, where we would have to listen to like French news for like a minute and a half, and then we had to like give a summary straight away, and all we could do is listen. That was really difficult, and I remember at the start thinking like, oh, this is tough. So what I did to prepare for that class was force myself every day to watch French news, or listen especially to French news. And I remember the first time, this was in my final year of French, I remember, so I'd been studying it for years. I remember watching the news and thinking, wow, this is tough. After a year of every day, just at the end of the day, and this was kind of passive watching as well. I would just have it on in the background. After like 9 months, I could understand the majority of it, because I guess my brain was training itself to do that. But I do think, ironically though, the more you do spend reading, the better your ears are getting, because you're identifying that sound, that approcher that I didn't know. If I can read that, approcher, okay, the next time I hear it, I won't need the subtitles, because I've learned by reading it. So the more you do it, that is your training for battle. But you only know, like you said, once you've tested yourself. So yeah, you could, an active way of doing that is play it without the subs. Identify what you didn't understand, go back, read it with the subs. And then you force yourself to like note that down and listen out for it. I think this is it. You don't need to say, oh, I'm going to listen out for that word. Your brain will identify that word. Once you've learned it through that, you will probably recognize it straight away. Like I now know from a Pokémon episode, approcher, that I can't forget that word, because I didn't know what it meant when I heard it. And I had to ask my Mauritian friend at the time, because I didn't have subtitles at that time. So it's super valuable to do both. I would say majority of time at the start with subs, and eventually you might get comfortable. But if you don't worry, go back, put them on, learn the word. It's all winning. As long as you're doing it consistently, you're going to take gains for sure.
There's been some, Alexander Arguelles, who I mentioned kind of off screen, kind of correlated learning a language to watering a plant. You know, and this is completely contrary to all the ways that we have to name our titles for our videos and stuff like this. Just to be honest, you guys, we all don't want to name our titles, learn a language fast and all this stuff. We just have to get forced into this world. And if you want to do it, we have to do this. But can you talk a little bit about that journey? Because I don't think people truly understand what that feels like, because you can't see, when you plant a seed for a plant, you don't get to watch it grow every day. It just happens. It's the same as a kid or something. They're bigger. You go away, you come back, it's bigger. Watering this plant every day is the same as understanding compound interest, compound gains, all this stuff. And would you, for yourself, rank higher consistency or intensity? Or would you rather have go to a large language camp where I spend 6 weeks, and then I just do a little bit every other day? What method for you seems, if you had a year, better to do? A little bit every day or a big sprint? How would you chunk that down?
I mean, in an ideal world, I think consistency overall wins. However, like, if you try and sprint all the time, as a footballer, right, you're going to gas out.
It's over.
However, you can sprint at certain times, and sprinting can be extremely effective and necessary. So for me, going to Reunion Island for a year was incredible. That was the sprint. I was surrounded by French and Creole. I had no choice, sink or swim. People were speaking to me in French. I couldn't understand. People speaking to me in Creole. I couldn't understand. I deliberately tried to stay away as much as I could from the English speakers. And even like I would force myself to use French. Like I sprinted for a year. That basically has helped me for life. But based on my life and everything, I wasn't going to live in French speaking countries for my whole life. So I couldn't always do that. I couldn't say, okay, I'm never going to go back to England again. I'm never going to go to Thailand again because they don't speak French. But the sprint was super useful. But then what helps is afterwards, when I'm in Thailand, when I'm in England, try and keep in contact with my French friends. Have a group around you. Like when you have friends, this is the advantage of if you're in a diverse place, London, you've got your diverse cities in America. It's way easier to do that. But consistency wins overall, always.